In der Ukraine zeichnet sich eine neue massive Rekrutierungswelle ab. Alle männlichen Bürger zwischen 18 und 60 Jahren sollen einer medizinischen Untersuchung unterzogen werden. Präsident Wladimir Selenskyj rühmte jüngst den Nutzen junger Soldaten für die Armee. Auch die ins Ausland geflohenen ukrainischen Männer sollen zurückgeholt werden, um an der Front zu kämpfen. So sollen auf Geheiß der ukrainischen Regierung allen kampftauglichen Männern im Ausland künftig die konsularischen Dienste verweigert werden. Und auch aus EU-Ländern wie Polen oder den baltischen Staaten werden die Rufe lauter, ukrainische Männer in die Ukraine abzuschieben. Wie bewertest du diese Vorgänge? Erleben wir ein verzweifeltes Aufstellen einer neuen ukrainischen Armee? Und was sagt es über die Menschlichkeit der EU aus und ihre humanitäre Hilfsbereitschaft? Droht eine Jagd auf ukrainische Männer innerhalb der EU?
Well, I just think it exposes the hypocrisy of the EU. The EU is, noted for its adherence to humanitarian principles. They embrace, legal theory premised on human rights. And they're throwing it all away right now to support a criminal regime of a corrupt nation involved in a conflict that is unjust, and I don't mean from the Russian perspective, and that will result in the needless deaths of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of additional Ukrainian men. But what's new? The EU has been, the home of hypocrisy for some time now, and this is just, additional icing on that cake. As for the Ukrainians, it speaks volumes that a nation that's supposed to be this, the shining example of democracy in Europe. We hear this from Volodymyr Zelensky all the time, what a strong democracy Ukraine is, and it's a beacon of hope for all of Europe, and that's why Europe should rush to its defense. But if it's that, then why aren't the Ukrainian men volunteering? Why are Ukrainian men running away from service? We should ask ourselves that question, because if Ukraine was a cause worth fighting for, worth dying for, then there should be no end of volunteers lining up and demanding the opportunity to serve their country on the front lines in such a noble cause. That's not happening because, by and large, the Ukrainian men don't believe in this conflict, don't believe in the cause, and they do not want to participate in this war. This mobilization order is an act of desperation on the part of a nation that has seen its NATO-trained army destroyed and rebuilt any number of times. This is just the latest iteration of an effort to rebuild a Ukrainian army assembled by NATO and sacrificed on the battlefield. And no matter what the end result is, how many, thousands or tens of thousands of Ukrainian men that are able to be mobilized in this effort, the result will be the same. They will be killed. They will be wounded. They will be captured. They will be dispersed. There will be no victory. I can tell you, as somebody who used to be a professional warrior, I don't want to go to war with people that don't want to be there. It's the quickest way to die. When you go to war, the man on your left and right, and I guess today the woman on your left and right, it's an equal opportunity killer, needs to be 100% focused on the mission, so that I can be focused on my mission, my zone of operations, what my jobs, my tasks are. I can't be distracted by thinking, well, that person, it doesn't want to be here. Maybe they're going to be sloppy in their job. So now I have to do two people's jobs. I'm not doing my job right, which means things that should be happening aren't happening. And in war, that means the enemy is going to get a tactical advantage, which they will then use to an operational advantage by destroying us. And then they get the strategic advantage by winning the battle, the campaign, the war. This Ukrainian army that's being built is going to be a very unmotivated army if they're able to build it. They don't have the luxury of time. the reason why we have this emergency mobilization is that there's a critical manpower shortage on the front lines. Every day we see the Russians not only killing more Ukrainians, but the Russians making more gains because there's nothing left of the Ukrainian army to stop them. Um, and so these forces can't be assembled and then sent to be trained. They used to be trained in Europe, by the way. They used to send them to Germany to be trained. And my understanding is that between 20 and 30% of the Ukrainians who went to Germany deserted and said, we don't want to go to war. And so my understanding is that the Ukrainian soldiers won't be sent to Europe anymore for training because too many of them will just run away. So now they'll be trained in Ukraine. Well, we know what happens when you get a large concentration of troops together in one place and the Russians detect it, they'll attack it. And so most of these soldiers have a good chance of dying while they're being trained before they get to the front lines. But there's not enough time to train them. They're needed now. Bodies are needed now. Fresh meat is needed now in the butcher shop that is called the front lines. And so they'll get the minimum level of training and thrown in the front lines. Meanwhile, Ukraine is receiving more advanced technology, more advanced weapons from the West. Weapons that are very difficult to use. They require a motivated soldier who's trained, highly trained, to not only use them, but to maintain them. And so what is Ukraine going to get? A bunch of guys that don't want to be there. They're poorly trained, and then they're going to be turned over on equipment that they haven't been trained to operate. They don't know how to use properly. It's just an invitation for disaster, which is exactly what this is, a disaster for Ukraine, for the Ukrainian people, and for those who support Ukraine. Germany, if you honestly think that this is going to somehow secure you, you're wrong. It's going to lead to the total destruction of Ukraine. It's going to lead to the further strengthening of Russia. And some could even say the further emboldening of Russia. Not that Russia has any ill intent towards NATO or Europe, but hey, if you guys want to pick a fight with Russia, I would advise that you don't pick a fight with a Russia that just came off winning a fight that you helped set up. Because Russia would just be doubly motivated to put you down if you truly do want to throw that first punch.
Vergangene Woche schrieb die ukrainische Journalistin Olga Len auf dem Nachrichtenportal espresso.tv über die Pflicht der ukrainischen Bürger im Ausland, sich für den militärischen Dienst zu melden. Dabei berührte sie auch die Frage, wie sich die massiven Todeszahlen der Ukraine, die russische Seite spricht von mittlerweile über 500.000 gefallenen Ukrainern, auf das Leben des Landes auswirken werde. Wörtlich formuliert Len: Es gibt keinen Grund zur Befürchtung, dass wir plötzlich zu wenige Menschen haben werden. Wer hat jemals gesagt, dass eine hohe Bevölkerungsdichte für ein Land gut ist? Was ist, wenn sich ein weitläufiges und dünn besiedeltes Gebiet im Gegenteil als angenehmerer Ort zum Leben erweist? Was sagst du zu diesen Aussagen? Was für eine Ideologie und was für ein Menschenbild stecken dahinter? Und welche Schlussfolgerungen lassen sich daraus ziehen auf die reale Lage innerhalb der Ukraine?
Again, I would draw your listener, who I assume is going to be a German, who lives in a European Union, in the European Union. Is this what you believe it? Do you believe in the culling of a national population? I mean, you used to. I know you used to, you Germans. You guys used to believe in the culling of populations. You were all about the annihilation of the Jewish populations. But it wasn't just Jews that you culled the Slavs. You had the grand master plan for how you're going to go east, the march on the east, and you were going to annihilate the Slavic population for Lebensraum. That's a big German thing, isn't it? Lebensraum. That's what you guys believe in, right? Killing the Untermensch. So you have Lebensraum. Are you really going to sit there and tolerate this kind of insanity coming from a nation you say you support? Do you support Lebensraum? Do you? Because that's what this is. She is saying she's supporting the culling of a nation. She's supporting the thinning of the ranks so that there's Lebensraum. And if you dig deeper, what she's really saying is to get rid of the non-Western Ukrainians, to get rid of the Russian Ukrainians, to get rid of those Untermensch, those orcs, those vatniks, all the words and terms that they throw out there to minimize the humanity of anybody who's not a pure Aryan Western Ukrainian. You know what I'm talking about. Germany, blonde hair, blue eyes. You guys used to do that thing. Embrace them, even though the vast majority of you don't have blonde hair and blue eyes. I've been to Germany. You got brown hair, brown eyes. I mean, it's okay. So do I. Ritter's a last name or German last name. Brown hair, brown eyes. I guess I'm not pure enough either for the Western Ukrainians. This is sickening. This is literally sickening. And I would hope that the German government would call them out. I would hope that the German parliament would call them out. I would hope that the German people would demand that their elected representatives call out this thinking, this ideology. But no, no, no. You're going to give them more money. All you're doing is paying for the ideological progeny of Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany to implement the very policies that Nazi Germany sought to implement back before the collective West and the Soviet Union defeated Germany in battle.
Lass uns über die Situation an der russisch-ukrainischen Front sprechen. Letzte Woche betonte der russische Verteidigungsminister Sergei Shoigu, dass Russland die strategische Initiative in der Hand habe. Insbesondere in den Regionen Donetsk und Lugansk gelangen den russischen Streitkräften einige Geländegewinne und die Einnahme mehrerer Ortschaften. Ist das der Auftakt zu einer großen Offensive? Vergangene Woche sprachst du von einer möglichen Einnahme von Charkow. In welchem Zeitrahmen könnte diese Realität werden?
Well, first of all, I would say that we are already witnessing a major offensive. What do you think's going on? A minor offensive? The Russians are in the business of killing Ukrainians, and the business is good. They're killing a lot of them. And that's always what Russia viewed this as, a war of attrition, to wear the enemy down. And then what happens in a war of attrition is when you wear the enemy down sufficiently, the enemy can no longer hold a piece of terrain and they fall back. And the Russians advance. We're seeing a lot of Russian advances all along the front line, which means that the Russians are enjoying military success on a broad stage. This implies that the Russians are carrying out a major offensive. Now, this offensive could be expanded when the collapse of the Ukrainians gets to a point where greater opportunities present themselves. The Russians don't operate off of a calendar. There's a temptation on the part of we observers to be impatient, because God forbid the Russians try to preserve human life. Unlike the Ukrainians, the Russians seem not to want to thin out their population. And so the Russians are taking their time. They don't want to rush in and lose everybody. They want to take their time to grind the enemy down, to advance. But they have the strategic initiative. Shoigu is correct. But there's no timeline. The Russian army has been ordered to accomplish X by May 9th, Victory Day, so that Vladimir Putin can stand before the Russian people and proclaim some great victory. That's how the West operates. Russia doesn't operate that way. It appears when you look at the map that Russia is positioning itself for a drive on Kharkov. There are political statements that have been made that imply this much as well. When this will happen is Russia's business. It's not my business, but it is happening. We know that. We have General Lapin, a veteran general of the war, who is arriving on the front line with 100,000 troops. We have other troops in training with other good generals coming in. These troops aren't there to play tiddlywinks. They're not there to sit in the dugout and play cards. They're there to do something. What they do is up to the Russian high command. Will they be thrown into, securing the Donbass? Will they be thrown into securing Kharkov? Remember, securing Kharkov now is a strategic objective because the Ukrainians made it so. The Ukrainians decided they want to launch offensive operations from the Kharkov area into Russia proper, into Belgorod, into Kursk. And the Russians have said that this will not be allowed to happen. They need to create a demilitarized buffer zone. Demilitarized means the destruction of the Ukrainian military, and the Russians are positioning themselves to do that. Russian generals that I have spoken to have said that they anticipate major changes in the map of the battlefield by May. But, the point is, will this happen? I think it is. I think we're seeing it right now. I think we're seeing the major developments on the battlefield. At some point in time, the Ukrainians won't be able to maintain their current positions, and they'll be compelled to make a precipitous withdrawal towards the Dnieper River. And when they do that, you'll see a major change in the battlefield. And at that point in time, opportunities raise their head for the Russians, and they can decide which way they want to go. So I feel comfortable with this Russian assessment. I feel comfortable with the Russian confidence. What I'm not going to do is commit to a time frame because I'm not in control of that. And all you do at that point in time is set yourself up for failure. I've learned that lesson in the past when people said, "Well, when do you think this is going to be?" And I scratched my little analytical head and I came up with a number. And darn it, the Russian high command didn't agree with me, and they did something different on a different timetable. And then I sit there trying to explain why I didn't get it right. I didn't get it right because it was a guess based upon factors that I'm not in control of. So I'm not going to be putting, underlining dates on a calendar anymore. I'm just going to say that I'm comfortable with what the Russians are saying about how this battle is going to progress.
Am Dienstag äußerte sich US-Verteidigungsminister Lloyd Austin mit großer Besorgnis über die sich vertiefende Allianz zwischen Russland und Nordkorea, welches dadurch immer selbstbewusster werde. Insgesamt beobachtet Washington mit Sorge, was Austin als wachsende Verflechtung zwischen der Volksrepublik China, Russland, der Demokratischen Volksrepublik Korea und dem Iran bezeichnet. Aus der US-Politik und insbesondere bei den US-Demokraten werden bereits Stimmen laut, die von einer neuen Achse des Bösen sprechen. Die US-Regierung erneuerte indes ihre Vorwürfe, China, Nordkorea und Iran würden Russland mit Waffen, Munition und Rüstungsgütern versorgen. Erstens, was sagst du zu diesen Anschuldigungen? Ist Russland auf die Rüstungslieferungen aus China oder Nordkorea angewiesen? Und zweitens, woher kommt diese Angst der USA vor einer möglichen russisch-chinesisch-iranisch-nordkoreanischen Militärallianz?
Excuse me. I mean, so you want me to comment on statements made by an American Secretary of Defense at a time when the United States Congress just passed a $90+ billion supplemental appropriations bill that has the Americans supplying weapons to Taiwan, to Israel, and to Ukraine, the Americans supporting and demanding that the rest of the world flood money into Ukraine, America, the #1 supplier of weapons around the world, the greatest arms dealer in the world. And you want me to comment on what his concern that other people are playing this game too? I don't give a damn what Lloyd Austin says. And here's my frank assessment. Neither does Russia, neither does China, neither does North Korea, neither does Iran. Lloyd Austin's statements echo in the halls of Congress and then get printed on newspapers in the United States, which line bird cages the next morning because that's the only utility they have. There's nothing of value on these papers. They're there to collect bird poop. And that they have value because now we could put them in the garbage can and the house won't stink like bird poop. That's all that Lloyd Austin's words are worth. They're meaningless. What is America going to do about it? Sanction Russia? They already tried. Didn't work. Sanction North Korea? Didn't work either. Sanction Iran? That didn't work either. Oh, they're going to sanction China, the biggest economy in the world. That's not going to work either. These are irrelevant statements made by an irrelevant man who represents an irrelevant administration of an increasingly irrelevant nation.
Speziell Nordkorea ist den USA ein großer Dorn im Auge. Das kleine asiatische Land scheint in den vergangenen Jahren enorme Fortschritte in Sachen Raketenentwicklung gemacht zu haben. Der iranische Luftschlag gegen Israel Anfang April scheint zudem eine Initialzündung gewesen zu sein, nachdem auch Nordkorea seine modernsten, supergroßen Sprengköpfe getestet und damit auch der Weltöffentlichkeit präsentiert hat. Diese sollen nuklear bestückbar sein. Gemeinsam mit den nordkoreanischen Langstreckenraketen Hwasong 15, die eine Reichweite von bis zu 15.000 Kilometern haben sollen, könnte somit auch die Westküste der USA zu einem Ziel werden. Mitte April appellierte Nordkoreas Staatschef Kim Jong-un an sein Volk, Nordkorea müsse sich vorbereiten auf einen Krieg. Wie leistungsfähig sind die nordkoreanischen Raketen? Haben die USA noch die Abschreckungshoheit im Pazifikraum? Und stellt Nordkorea wirklich eine Bedrohung für die US-Bevölkerung dar?
The fact that Russia and China are opening up relations with North Korea indicates a couple things. One, that they are taking a collective interest in the security of North Korea. But why? Why would Russia and China take a collective interest in the security of North Korea? Because they're seeking to integrate North Korea into their political and economic spheres of influence, and interest. That means that their long-term goals of North Korea is to improve the economic well-being of North Korea and the economic well-being of the North Korean people. So war does not factor into that. What Russia and China are seeking to do with the North Koreans is create a North Korea that is strong enough to deter irresponsible militarism on the part of the United States, Japan, and South Korea. This is what the North Korean ballistic missile force is all about. This is what the North Korean nuclear force is all about. It's a force of deterrence. And it's necessary because the United States and South Korea have a master plan that includes the decapitation of the North Korean leadership. Once a year, we exercise this where dozens of aircraft fly towards the demilitarized zone separating South Korea and North Korea, as if they're simulating a large airstrike against Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. At the last second, they veer away from the border. But as far as the North Koreans are concerned, one day they may just keep coming. And then what do you do? How do you tell the West that that's not worth it? The key to deterrence is that the other side must believe that the consequences of their actions will be so great, so dire, that there's no reason to carry out these actions. If the United States and South Korea believed that they could get away with a decapitation strike against North Korea, they would conduct a decapitation strike against North Korea. North Korea has built up a ballistic missile capability right now that has survivability and lethality. So if the United States and South Korea ever attempted a decapitation strike against North Korea, the North Koreans have created a military capability that makes it all but assured that there will be the destruction not only of South Korea, but of Japan, and the United States will likewise pay a heavy price with the real potential of North Korean nuclear-armed ballistic missiles hitting American cities. Suddenly, a war with North Korea is no longer something that either South Korea, Japan, or the United States is seeking to promote. Deterrence has been achieved, not from the United States, North Korean deterrence of American, South Korean, and Japanese aggressive potential. And this is the state we're at today. The United States has made a big deal about ballistic missile defense capability ever since George W. Bush withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty back in 2002, disrupting, arms control norms and standards, forever. They said we have to do that because we have to protect ourselves from missile threats. And hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on building ballistic missile defense capabilities. The same defense capabilities that the United States has assured South Korea and Japan will protect them from the North Korean ballistic missile threat failed to protect Israel when Iran launched its attack. The Iranians were able to have at least 9 missiles, probably up to 15 missiles of high capability, penetrate the missile defense shield and hit the targets that they were assigned to hit in Israel, proving that there's no missile defense shield for Israel, that Iran at any time it wants to can reach out and touch any place in Israel it wants to with a weapon and achieve the desired results. Iran now has deterrence superiority because now Israel knows that if it attacks Iran, there will be an Iranian response that Israel cannot defend against, and that response will be devastating. North Korea now has deployed missiles that have maneuvering warheads, hypersonic missiles with maneuvering warheads, the combination of which will defeat the American ballistic missile shield over the Korean peninsula. There is no missile defense now for Japan, South Korea, or American forces in the region. This further enhances North Korea's deterrence capability. And so I think North Korea is where it needs to be right now to keep America, South Korea, and Japan, from thinking they can get away with the unthinkable, which is launching a preemptive strike designed to decapitate North Korean leadership and to compel North Korea into surrendering. Right now, the certainty is that no matter what the United States, Japan, and South Korea do with the initial attack, North Korea will be able to respond with nuclear weapons that will destroy all of South Korea, all of Japan, and more than likely take out a number of American cities. And hopefully logic will prevail, sanity will prevail, and America, South Korea, and Japan will stop, behaving in an aggressive posture towards North Korea. But North Korea's future isn't about repairing relations with the West. North Korea's future is about protecting itself from the West and becoming a part of this Eurasian economic miracle that's developing right now with Russia, China, and Central Asian states, bringing their economies together, looking at economic growth, looking at, co-prosperity amongst people. North Korea is going to be attached. They're not members of BRICS yet. They're not members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization yet, but they're good friends with Russia and China, who are not only members, but leaders of this. And so whatever benefits that BRICS membership and Shanghai Cooperation Organization membership brings to both Russia and China, North Korea will benefit from these as well. That's a pretty bright future for the North Korean people.
Bleiben wir bei der von den USA antizipierten neuen Achse zwischen Russland, China, Iran und Nordkorea. Alle 4 Nationen haben in den vergangenen Jahren enorme Fortschritte in Sachen Raketenentwicklung gemacht, ob nun Hyperschallraketen oder Interkontinentalraketen. Russland ist die größte Atommacht der Erde. China verfügt über Atomwaffen. Iran und Nordkorea könnten, wenn nötig, in kurzer Zeit Atomwaffen verfügbar haben. Kannst du das bitte im Detail erklären? Warum haben diese 4 Nationen so großes Augenmerk auf ihre Raketenprogramme gelegt? Welche Auswirkungen hat das auf die globale Militärpräsenz der USA und die weltweite Dominanz des Westens? Welche Antwort haben die USA darauf?
Again, we focus on George W. Bush's reason for withdrawing from the ABM Treaty was to breathe life into Ronald Reagan's mythology of a missile defense system that can protect the United States with close to 100% certainty from ballistic missile threats. This, of course, was something that was popular after 9/11 when America started feeling vulnerable, even though it wasn't ballistic missiles that hit us. It was airplanes, and we started to use our imagination about a new Pearl Harbor and how nations could acquire ballistic missile capabilities that we could not defend ourselves against because we signed an anti-ballistic missile treaty. So we withdrew from that treaty and started to build the perfect defense shield. Now, we said that the defense shield was only for our defense, that you shouldn't be threatened by it. This only protects us against a rogue nation firing missiles. But the problem with a defense shield of that nature is that if you allow it to build it, that makes you, invulnerable to any attack, which means that now you are free to attack. You can attack somebody and you don't have to fear the consequences of their counterattack because you've built this ballistic missile shield. And suddenly America has flipped the script in terms of global security paradigms. America is the sole nation capable of striking without consequence. And that destroys the concept of deterrence balance. Mutually assured destruction was something that the United States and the Soviet Union operated on, and most nuclear powers operate under a modification of that maxim, that if you use nuclear weapons, you can be hit with nuclear weapons, and the damage that will be done is so great that you don't want to use nuclear weapons to begin with. But now the United States not only is building a ballistic missile shield, but we are talking about, and we did change our nuclear posture so that it was no longer about nuclear deterrence. It was about the potential of turning nuclear weapons designed for nuclear deterrence into a warfighting capability that gives us preemptive strike capability. We now began to talk about using nuclear weapons preemptively in a non-nuclear environment. So now if you're Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, and you're looking at that, you're saying, well, wait a minute, how do we get deterrence back? Well, the Russians and Chinese have nuclear weapons. So did North Korea. But the problem is, again, the missile shield, that you may have nuclear weapons, but let's say the United States strikes you and attempts to knock out your nuclear weapons with a preemptive strike that's large enough. Whatever weapons that you have survive now have to go through a ballistic missile defense shield that could possibly knock the majority of them out, meaning you have no nuclear deterrence. You're not deterring anybody. So you need to develop ballistic missiles that can defeat the ballistic missile shield. You need to eliminate the shield from the equation, because once the shield is eliminated, the United States and its allies now becomes vulnerable to your ballistic missile attack, so that the concept of mutually assured destruction once again rears its ugly head. And this is what Russia has done. Vladimir Putin warned the United States repeatedly. And if you remember, in 2018, he got up and he announced the creation of new weapon systems, the Sarmat heavy ICBM, avant-garde maneuvering hypersonic warheads, other weapons. And he said, you didn't listen to me as I warned you about the consequences of withdrawing from the ABM treaty. Are you listening to me now? And the answer, of course, no. America never listens to Russia because we don't treat Russia with respect. And now these weapons have been deployed. And what's happened is the Iranians did sort of a demonstration of the importance of hypersonic missiles with maneuvering warheads. They penetrated this $100 billion plus ballistic missile shield, showing that all the technology that the United States was relying upon is useless. That's why these nations develop these capabilities. That's why Iran has hypersonic missiles with maneuvering warheads. That's why the North Koreans have the same. The Chinese have the same. That's why Russia has developed similar capabilities, because they have nullified the ballistic missile shield advantage that the United States was trying to create. And now we're back to square one, where if the United States ever does launch a preemptive strike, the one thing that is guaranteed is that it will be hit with overwhelming firepower in the form of ballistic missiles that the United States cannot shoot down.